Hello and welcome. Today we've got Dr. Jan, who worked at the Department of Defense, and today we are going to be discussing Trump, the economy, and much more around the political arena. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin, where you can follow all my daily newsreels. Dr. Jan, thank you so much for joining me. How are you, and what have you been up to?
Oh, you know what? I'm fine. And I'm so happy. This is my first time with you after following you from day one when you started. So this is just great. Thanks for having me.
Well,
I happen to be in Atlanta because the Heathrow Animal Control would not let my dog back in because the vet didn't fill out the form right. So he had to get a new rabies shot. And we're grounded for 21 days. It's freezing here. How about in London? I keep getting calls that it's freezing.
It's
Where are
freezing.
you?
It's freezing in London. I just got to Miami, and it's a very fair, reasonable temperature. It's not too cold here. It's a little bit breezy. And I hope everything's going well, with your pet, with everything. I hope that turns out to be good. But yeah, it's very, very interesting times that we're living in. And just before I begin with some questions, Dr. Jan, I would like you to tell the viewers how you got into, if you can, the Department of Defense. What was your role? What was you doing? And if you could tell us, that would be great.
Okay. By way of my background is that I have been a corporate psychologist. I went back in 2017. I was accepted at Stanford's Institute for Political Psychology because prior from 2014 until Trump was elected, I, as a volunteer, had been the global vice president of Republicans overseas, had set up our 51 country chapters, and we were fighting on a tax issue for all expats that were living abroad. But as a consultant, I have probably at this point in my life trained, coached, advised well over 30,000 executives, managers, supervisors, et cetera. And one person that I kept in touch with, he is at the Department of Defense, and there is a task force, and he asked if I would be one of the 12 members on that task force. And we have a forensic psychologist, we have a forensic accountant, we have 2 woke social psychologists. It's very important that you have those kind of people on your team because they can explain to you things you don't understand. And my particular aspect, my role, is to get a sense of, in the beginning, it was to be able to understand the resistance to the change, why people weren't necessarily waking up, what were their concepts of things, what were people receptive to. As it grew, the best way to understand it for me was to begin to get a spectrum of people being awake. So it starts with the people that go, what? What are you talking about? Huh? Well, I heard that, but no, what? And they are clueless. My worry is they're going to remain clueless because whatever the authority says is what they will just obey. Then you have that's just a conspiracy theory. They reject anything. It could be the first 3 words of your sentence. Then where my hope comes in is that group is divided. You've got part of the group that I think they want to be awake, but they just can't admit that they've been wrong or that they believed, and they don't want to feel that they've been conned. And then you've got the group that are genuinely asking questions. And that is where the spectrum comes in of the depth of how much they're awake. So they're just starting. Then you have the group that is aggressively researching. And then we get to the ones who've been around a long, long time and see through everything. And I call them the seers. I don't call them the truthers. They are the seers. They have done the research. They've seen through things. They are the seers. And so I now I'm able to focus on whatever Jung called it the collective unconscious. And there are always themes. So sometimes we wonder, how come Americans are talking about this? Then how come people in India and people in Timbuktu are thinking the same thing? And that is because we really are all connected. So I am looking right now, I've been spending a couple of weeks on this, is the particular aspect of infighting that is going on in social media. Because as a people-led movement gets closer and closer to success, the infighting increases. One of the things of the people, whether they're anons or what, because I really have never been part of that. I mean, I'm getting to know them since my interview on August 3rd, and I've become more active on X, formerly Twitter, as every magazine and every newspaper says. They have this attitude of, oh, these new people that are coming out, we've been around for so long. Who are they to be making these comments? Well, they don't own it. Yeah, they've been around, but then they get upset about the quote unquote new voices, which I'm not really a new voice. I'm perhaps a more known voice on X, but since Donald Trump came down the golden escalator, I've been on CNN, CNBC, BBC World Service, ITV, ABC, NBC. I'm known in the UK as the rabid supporter of Trump. And I spend a lot of time explaining Republican politics and also what's going on in America. And so that pretty much defines why I was asked to be on this task force and what I get to do. And honestly, it's one of the best projects I've ever had because I get to understand where people are at. And my interview on August 3rd that was on GB News that went viral, people have said that because I wasn't a podcaster, because I was like the first human being on mainstream media to say this, it's helped families come together. The seers, as they've been ostracized for so long, and some of them tell me that finally their family members and friends are giving them some credence. What could be better? If that's what I'm doing, what could be better?
Well, I think that's great. And that's what we need. We need validation because too long, the seers have been called crazy. But a lot of the things that are now slowly coming out, drip, drip from the media, from outside of the media, there's leaks from up above and to the sides. People are starting to see it. They're starting to lose confidence with the government, with the media, with the way everything's being run. And I think there is a shift in consciousness and more of us are being, we're more together, So when you say you had that interview on GB News and, people, their families, they were, put together more, we were more connected. What was the type of things that you said on GB News that you thought that had that effect?
Well, I work East Coast hours. So when I'm in the UK, I don't go to sleep till about 3 in the morning, and I'm up at 9 or 10. I get my 5 or 6 hours sleep. But the car was picking me up at 6 in the morning, and I was too afraid to go to sleep. So I stayed up all night. And I was also really excited because Fannie Willis had filed the case in Georgia against the 19 defendants. And I was going to get to talk about that. Well, when I got to the station, the producer said to me, and we were listening to other people that had been on. He said, "So what are you going to talk about?" And I said, "I'm going to reinforce what other people have been saying, but what I'm going to get to talk about is tie this in with Jack Smith, who filed the federal case against Trump, that he made a mistake and Trump has due process, which means all of the goods from the 2020 are going to be able to come out. He is going to be able to present what he thinks is right in court." And he goes, "Oh, no one's talked about that." Now, I do GB News with some frequency. They have never given me 10 minutes, but they gave me 10 minutes to discuss. And I kicked it off by saying that Biden is the legitimate president of the bankrupt corporation. And that kind of threw people off.
Sure.
And go ahead, interrupt anytime. Please feel free.
Oh, no, please, it's fine. I'm enjoying this, and so are the viewers.
So that, and here's the other good part, is every other time I have been on GB News, and quite a few of my interviews have gone viral, not viral like this one went, but they have always said, "Don't talk about 2020. But this time I could, because that was the subject matter. So I was able to start off with that. And one of the things that I had been waiting that I could actually admonish the media about, and I would love to be able to admonish the American media about as well, is that when Trump supposedly walked in front of the Queen and then they were making jokes about him, what I had explained was that while the liberals, the wokes, always talk about microaggressions, they need to start looking at micro expressions. Because if you go back and look at that video, you will see that that Trump looked at the Queen, she flicked her hand, he took 2 steps. Now, based on their position, she could have just turned and taken 2 steps and been in line with him. Instead, she walked behind him and then came to his side, and the 2 of them started walking. I explained that Trump does a lot of things in optics, and that was an optic to tell us, guess what? He finally was able to tell the Queen, "I'm bankrupting the corporation." This connection between the Vatican, the City of London, and the United District of Columbia, not the United States, the District of Columbia. All 3 of those entities are sovereign states. In 1067, the City of London was given its charter to, in essence, be its own government and continued that way. It had to be renewed year by year until 1199, when King John gave them, never having to be renewed again, that they were their own country. They don't have to respond to any kind of freedom of information, and they are exempt from any human rights acts, the City of London. Mostly, maybe you want to rationalize it as trade and wealth, but no, it's a lot more, because they are the controllers of the cabal. Now, then I went into explaining that if you pull up the picture of Donald Trump and the Pope, I have never seen Trump with such a big smile on his face. I've never seen him so happy. And I actually loved seeing the Pope as dour as he looked, because Trump had explained to the Pope, we're taking our gold back. We're not part of this. You're not the bank for America anymore. And so eventually he sent 650 planes to get all of our gold out of the Vatican. And that was the next part of breaking that corporation that was District of Columbia. Now, I also explained to them that in Executive Order 13848, where Trump, and he filed it September 12th, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
How did he know to mention in that about fraudulent possibility of elections all the way to 2020? Well, there are ways, but he did that, and that is what allowed him to continue to push things forward. He knew, because the military had been well aware of the manipulation, let's just call it manipulation of elections, that has been going on decades. And it's not just on the Democrat side, it's just the corruption that has existed within elections around the globe has really been suspected. And we keep on getting bits and bits of reinforcement or validation about that. So from that, Trump would have come after he had gone to the Pope to the UK, but John Bercow, who was the Speaker of Parliament, although he let Xi Jinping come and speak to Parliament, would not let Trump back in 2017 do it. So that's why it took so long for this information to come out and for the bankruptcy to officially be filed. The Crown Corporation has nothing to do with the monarchy, but it is a constitutional monarchy, and out of respect for the Queen, that was why it was very important for Trump to meet with her and to explain that. So those were the key points that I really hit on in that interview. Now,
Right.
People have mistakenly, one person in particular who is a very well-respected podcaster, but I have been very upset by, well, he gets interviewed. He doesn't have his own podcast, but he made the mistake of acting like he knew when asked the question about how did Trump, read truth? And he gave the misinformation that, well, Trump had to have known, and she's with the Department of Defense and blah, blah, blah. No, that it was God. I had prayed for 10 days before I did that interview. And it just so happened that Don Jr. had spoken to Nigel Farage the night before, and they played that clip. It was because Don Jr. forwarded it to President Trump, and then he retruthed it. But then General Flynn retruthed it. And that one means a lot to me, because where Trump said, Dr. Jan Harper-Hayes is fantastic, and you should watch this interview, and she nailed the interviewer, blah, blah, blah. The most important thing that Flynn did, she has spelled out what this plan is and where we hope to get to. And that to me was a very important validation, because it came from him and because he knows, but more importantly, it did explain to people there really is a plan.
Absolutely. Now, very interesting. Now, with everything happening right now with Ron DeSantis stepping down, endorsing Trump. We've got Vivek Ramaswamy stepping down, endorsing Trump. Yes, we have Chris Christie stepping down, but still not endorsing Trump, maybe yet. Do you think they know something, that something is about to happen? I have this feeling that Ron DeSantis was already, this was all planned all along, and they were friends, and they went to take the spaces to fill them up so that they could step down later as a way to leave Trump on his own to victory. Not that he wouldn't have got victory already on his own, but what do you think about all this?
Well, that, if you don't mind my saying, is very wishful thinking, but
Okay.
it is not at all factual. What happened was there is this horrible human being named Matthew Tierman, who is on the board of Project Veritas, and he decided to support DeSantis, and he decided that he wanted Project Veritas to work on exposing Trump and support DeSantis. Then you have Steve Cortez, who had been a big supporter of Trump, had often been on the war room, who even before DeSantis announced, 3 days before, he wrote an op-ed for Newsweek that I actually countered in my Substack. And he became the next traitor, so to speak. The big money donors who really still fear Trump, they don't hate Trump, and people really need to understand that. This amount of energy, these comments, this going after him has nothing to do with hating. They fear him because from the very beginning, he said, we've got it all. And they know that. They know that he does, and they are afraid of being exposed. So the big donors decided to put money behind DeSantis. Now, DeSantis hadn't necessarily decided that he was going to run, but he was forced into it. Forced is my word. He was encouraged by the big money people because they thought that they could present him as a mini Trump. Well, he's so opposite. But then if you also look at the fact that his advisor was Karl Rove, the Bushies, Jeb Bush, GW, all came behind him, then you know that just looking at that, there's no way he was America first. Mm-hmm. So I have always felt bad for Ron DeSantis. I knew him when he was a congressman. When we were working on the tax issues, I was in DC quite a bit. I'd been in meetings with him. And I think he has been the foremost governor. He is a role model, or had been a role model, for how people should govern their states. And I think they've actually ruined his chances for 2028. And I feel very bad for him.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Now, is he safe? Isn't it dangerous now that he's quitted, all the donors that have donated to the campaign? What do you think about that?
Well, the good thing is the donors started defecting a couple of months ago when they saw that he really wasn't a good candidate. Because if you look at a speech that he gave probably about a year or more ago about what they achieved in Florida, and his enthusiasm and his presentation and his ability to communicate, none of that part of him came out while he was campaigning. And as more and more saw that Trump had it, they started defecting in earlier days. And so the last of the supporters of DeSantis, they will want to make sure that there is a Republican in the White House. So those dwindling few, they'll come on board. And if they don't come on board, they'll go support the Lincoln Project with the crazy Rick Wilson, who's another never Trumper who's obsessed.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And how about Vivek Ramaswamy? Why do you think his decision was to step down?
Well, what Iowa caucuses, I've always called the coming out party and the saying goodbye party, because in 08, in 12, and 2016, all the Republicans who led by big numbers in Iowa did not make it beyond that. They were never the nominee. It is a very Christian white state. And so the reason Iowa was always the kickoff was in 68, the Democrats decided that we were going to have this primary system, and it was no longer going to be picking them from the back room. Because what people might not be aware of is in the olden days, to many of the young people, we didn't know who the vice president was going to be until the convention. They were working things out in the back room. I mean, there was always, the next person in line was going to get it, but the public didn't necessarily know. So Iowa seized on the moment to be the first in the primary race, but they're just a caucus. And a caucus is, I hope I get this right. Well, let me just say there are over 1,000 precincts in the small state of Iowa. And in all those precincts, the people that belong to the precincts come, and it used to be fun because they would vote for who they were supporting, because it would decide on the ultimate delegates that would go to the convention. And after the first round, if your candidate didn't really make it, then you could decide which other group, kind of like even when we were in school and there'd be different teams, and then someone would say, well, I want someone from that team to come on to my team. And there would be all of that. And it used to be really fun. But Vivek Ramaswamy, he didn't do well. And so the writing was on the wall for him. And that pretty much is what happened with DeSantis, because even though we have New Hampshire coming up, and I wouldn't put a lot of credence in New Hampshire, because people in New Hampshire can walk in and register on that day, no matter what party you normally are registered for. And that is actually what happened in Iowa, because Trump had won all 99. And then one person came in, and this person was a Democrat, but they switched to being a Republican, but then they voted for Nikki Haley, or they voted for Ron DeSantis. The long and short of it was, it turned it into, he won 98 of those counties. And Nikki Haley's hanging in there because she's got lots of Democrat money. She's got the Koch brothers behind her, and the never Trumpers that are afraid of Trump.
So you're saying, and I think so too, that Donald Trump wants to show the world the election fraud. He wants to show them the evidence. When this happens, do you believe that we will have a 2024 election going forward? Do you think something is going to happen where everything is cancelled and, military comes in, or they have to restore him as the president of the United States because they stole the election in 2020? How do you see this playing out in this year's elections?
Well, because of people that had made predictions and suppositions in my early days of watching podcasts and how it sent me into hopium, I avoid that. But I will explain what I look for and certain signs. The first thing was that Trump knew the fraud was going to happen. That is what took Hillary so long to give her concession speech. She didn't have one written, but the military prior to 2016 had actually wanted to take Obama out. It took convincing Trump to run that they held off. And as I said earlier, the awareness of the machinations in elections has been well known. If the New York Times or the Washington Post gets the tallies from each state of the votes and the media as it's happening, how could you think our military has not been having that? They have always been collecting it because the military knew that the other side was going to continue with their shenanigans in elections. They prevented that from happening in 2016. As I mentioned earlier, 13848, the executive order about fraud, 2018 came out before our 2018 midterms. Mm-hmm. And there was an awareness, and we had to let I know people say, oh, Trump lost, the House, lost the Senate, whatever. No. Trump knew that was going to go on. 2020, he knew. 2022, that one, I only had been told months after, because that one sent me into a huge hopium depression because I thought justice would finally be served. No, they had to get the low-hanging fruit. So if you look at all of that, they have been working on not circumventing, but allowing it to happen to identify all the different ways. It's just not the drop boxes. It's not fake voter names. It's not just the machines. It's all of that they are having to get into to prevent. Will 2024 happen? I can say I hope it will happen, but what I look at more is, are these cases against Trump going to be thrown out? Trump needed to let it happen so he could talk about the steal, because the most important thing that has happened amongst the people is that they have realized our politicians have never been there for we the people. And it has gotten people up off their behinds and have made them active. That was the most important thing. And the number of grassroots groups that are working to combat all of this around the country has been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So we have to see where these lawsuits go. I keep saying, hey, Supreme Court, what's happening with Brunson? Please, Supreme Court, we need, we need to know about Brunson. So what I would say to people is that it's not so important to even have any hope about what will happen. What's more important is to read the signs that things are happening to get us to where we want to get to. That is the most important.
Do you think that the 2020 election steal was a trap to get them caught? And please tell me, when Donald Trump said that he's going to come back and he made that speech when he had to, step back, and then Biden illegitimately stole the election, do you think Donald Trump had expected it? Was it a trap? Did he look upset deep down? Because we were all devastated. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, talk about devastation. Oh, it took me months to get out of that depression. And I was already on the DOD task force. But when you have clearance, you live in silos of what you know, what you don't know, what you don't get to know, what you can't share, what you can, who you can talk to, which is only the people that know what you know. the Democrats are very, very smart at playing the media. And of course, the media just totally supports them. A year before 2020, they started with this messaging. Oh, if Donald Trump loses, he's never going to leave the White House. He already knew he was leaving. He already knew what was going to happen. That is why Executive Order 13848 is so significant. That is why he created or declared a national emergency in that executive order. That is why that I think they were sanctioned as marshals, but he initiated 1 million National Guards. President is the only one who can do that. Normally, each governor is in charge of the National Guards from their state. So he activated those people. And in fact, on Martin Luther King's birthday, that Monday, 2021, Major or General William Walker, in an interview with George Stephanopoulos on ABC, said, "We are here to enact the military." I don't have that verbatim, but that is exactly what he said. So the military was put in action in 2021 on Martin Luther King's birthday, that Monday in January, which might have been January 15th. I'm not sure of the exact date, but just look up Martin Luther King's birthday, look up 2021, look up General Walker and George Stephanopoulos, and you'll see that it's on YouTube.
Absolutely. Tell me something. I mean, this Joe Biden that we have today, it doesn't even look anything like the Joe Biden that we knew before. Who is he?
Oh, that's a big guess. I think what's more important is that this entity in there, being Joe Biden, has renewed the key executive orders that Donald Trump put in place. When the Democrats open their eyes to see that everything they don't believe in, but their quote unquote president has been reinforcing, revalidating, re-executing Donald Trump's executive orders, they're going to freak out.
They're going to get a heart attack.
Oh, well, hopefully they'll go into a hopium depression like we had to go into.
Can't even the Democrats see that this Joe Biden that they have now in place just does not look like the Joe Biden we had before?
They don't care. They don't care because they only care about power. They only care about ruining America. They only care about the fact that they at least are living, and I call them delusional Democrats. You know, if you had conservatives and liberals that were all in Disney World, you would have the conservatives that would be on Main Street. They would go to Frontierland and they would go to Adventureland. But if you wanted to find the liberals, they live in Fantasyland and Tomorrowland. And that is where their mindset is. Mm-hmm. They think about how things are versus how they should be. They get upset, but they can't accept reality. When you think about the political issues, do they ever talk about action or how they're going to fix things? No, they criticize the conservatives. They don't even talk about really how things should be, because I don't even think they have a vision about that. The best they can do is blame, criticize, and never take responsibility.
So this person, you know, Joe Biden, quote unquote, president of the United States, you know, reenacting these Donald Trump executive orders, who is Joe Biden, the one that we see today, who is he working for?
Well, if he is doing that, one could suspect, and this is where I hesitate to, answer this question affirmingly or negatively, because I don't like to be requoted when I don't have the facts. So, what I would say as an individual, it gives me hope that we're making progress. We're making a lot of progress, and the right people are being not in control, but the right people are doing the right things to get us to the right place.
I have to say that the steal of the 2020 election and having to see the Biden administration perform their presidency, I have to see that tells me that it's woken a lot of people up around the world to what they do not want and what they do want. And if I had to say it's done something good, that's what it's done. But
exactly. And Trump, people say, well, if Trump had all the goods, why didn't he expose it? Because one, he knew there'd be a civil war. I mean, just look, he had to take the moneyed people out who funded Antifa, who funded Black Lives Matters, because those were the people that were destroying American cities. Those people are the domestic terrorists, not the parents that go to the school board meetings and things like that.
I want to ask you, who do you think, in your own opinion, from everything you've seen, who do you think Donald Trump will choose as his vice president?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Uh, uh, One thing he said in a Tucker Carlson interview, in fact, the first one he did with Tucker the night of the very first Republican debate, he made a comment. He said, I am the president of all the people. So he could pull a Trump, and he could pick a Senator Manchin, who is the most conservative Democrat, and that would pull the whole country together. I know RFK has said he wouldn't be VP, and actually, he shouldn't be. He should be head of Health and Human Services to expose this pandemic scandal. I know it won't be Kristi Noem because, and this is very public now because it has been in the media, she and Corey Lewandowski had a side relationship. Trump was very much aware of it. When he did his rally in South Dakota, he actually called out her husband to commend him for all of his contributions to the state. So when the media is going, Kristi Noem, no. Here's what I struggle with. Who, whether they're in business or politics or medicine, who has even a third or 2/3 of the backbone that Donald Trump has, because the vice president this time around is not going to be just a figurehead should something happen to the president who then will step in, like the heir and the spare. It cannot be a spare. It really has to be someone, because they will be important to take over in 2028.
Do you think that it could be one of Trump's member of family? And if I had to choose, maybe Ivanka?
No.
None of those.
No. The amount of flack he would get for nepotism He would never do that.
Got it.
Never.
Right. Got it. Now,
Plus, I don't want Jared back.
okay, yeah. Now, let me ask you this. Now, you say that these Democrats, they want to just ruin the country. They also want to ruin the world. They want to raise our taxes. They want us, suffering. They want us depressed. They want us struggling financially. They want, all the chemicals that they put in the sky to poison us so they can become more rich, big pharma. But I think it's worse than money and greed. I don't think it's just money, because they can print money and they can have as much of it as they want. What is their ultimate goal here of enslaving humans?
I'm still of the place that it is power and greed. Because why, throughout the pandemic, was it only the 1% that got richer and richer? What people need to understand is this one world order objective and plan has been going on for centuries. That plan has been in place since, I don't know the exact date, but even if you go back to the late 1600s in Britain, when the city of London took control of the monarchy, they got tired of Charles I bankrupting and loaning him money, Charles II, then James II. So then what happened was they got in touch with Pope Innocent XI, who was a member of the Italian Orlescacchi banking family, to loan who they recruited, which was Prince William of Orange, to pay for 20,000 fighters to come into Britain and take over the country. That is when the moneyed people really started to control who was able to come into the monarchy.
Wow, that's crazy.
And when you think about that kind of power that is centered between the goldsmiths and the bankers, that's what continues to worry me. And those are the people that are most afraid of Donald Trump, because he is working on bankrupting them. When that happens, then we are going to be able to have control over our own money and not be part of the debt system they set up.
Do you think that Donald Trump has the intention to completely close down the Federal Reserve, get rid of the debt, and even some form of taxes, like income tax, for example? I understand there should be some kind of flat tax where, the government needs, maybe a smaller government needs some kind of funding to run the country honestly and genuinely. But the way they're taxing us is absolutely disgusting. Do you think that this would be significantly dropped, that it would make a very big impact in everybody's lives to move forward and plan for their futures?
He already started working towards that goal, because the Federal Reserve, which is part of the cabal, which is part of the central banking system, he moved it and put it under the Treasury Department when Mnuchin was there throughout his administration. So that was the first part. What I hear, and when it comes into the financial world and the changes, that's not my wheelhouse. So I tread lightly there. But at least from what we've read, from what I know, and even what I said to GB News, is that because of the corporation that was created, the US tax dollars were going to the City of London. A good portion of that to pay back supposedly what we owed for 151 years. I mean, what kind of interest was there? And when did you get to pay the principal off? That whole debt system. So those things are in place, and we just need to look at more actions. So one of those actions is how many nations are going to gold and backing their currency by gold. That is an important thing because that is happening not just in Russia. It is happening to many, many other countries.
Interesting. Now, if the banks and the Federal Reserve, obviously, and all the banks under it, they run illegally with the printing and the inflation and everything, and we're not even gold backed at the moment. What happens later when they're exposed to all the existing loans and mortgages that have been taken out using that system?
I wish I knew.
Okay.
I don't have a mortgage.
I know.
I got to tell you, I think, why do I not have a mortgage in the UK? Because I wish I did have a mortgage. If that is true, that it will be forgiven. You know, I own out. That was one thing when I came. I've been in the UK for almost 23 years, but in the US, we used to get to deduct our interest off of our income. So if I was paying $3,000 in interest and my mortgage payment was $4,000, that $3,000 came off of maybe the $10,000 I made. But that has never existed in the UK. So I got into that mind frame of you don't want to have a mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. And to ask me most of the financial stuff, I don't know. I wish.
No, that's
I'm
okay.
in the category of wishing with everyone else.
It's good to ask, just in case you do know, and they're very reasonable questions. You know, if there's fraud, then it should be null and void. You know, that's what traditionally happens. So it sounds too good to be true when we look at the amount of money and the amount of freedom it will give to the people. But when we look at the fraud and the null and void, if it's caught, the contracts, then it makes sense because it does happen on a very small scale, even today to some degree, not with the banks, but with other things. But Dr. Jan Harper-Hayes, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing all your opinions. I really enjoyed our interview. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Well, subscribe to my Substack. It's drjan.substack.com because I offer some advice. I reveal some things that happened in the past. It's the Patriot Shrink. And you can follow me on X, which is at biz_shrink, or Truth, which is real Dr. Jan.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jan. And we'll speak again very soon. You take care and God bless you. Bye-bye.
God bless you and enjoy that sun in Miami. I'm jealous.
Thank you.